Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast English, and it's a pleasure to finally kick off this project. We're very excited. I'm here with a wonderful structure and my great friend Rodolfo. He's going to be here with me. Rodolfo, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with me here.
Thank you, Taliso. It's great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for this structure. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this wonderful podcast, and I'm happy to be here as a regular, apparently. So it's just wonderful. Let's talk about English. Let's talk about English and culture, English and sports, English and maybe politics. Even why not? Right?
Of course, yeah. No, it's a pleasure to have you here. You know, you're my number one choice. Every time I think of a project, I always call you. And what I like is you don't even wait for me to finish my sentence. I say, Rodolfo,
Yes.
I have an I yes, and it's always a pleasure to count on you. And
Gotta be careful with that.
you are
Yes.
one of the most talented guys I've ever met in my career.
Thank
So
you.
to have you here is awesome. And yes, that's the idea. Let's talk about English and culture, sports, music, because you are a musician. I love music.
Yes.
So we're going to have a lot of different guests here.
Exactly.
And we'll be sharing a lot of knowledge, a lot of cultural aspects as well. And yeah, that's the idea of the podcast.
And more than that, as former English teachers, as full-time English teachers, we can also add to these recording later on and then provide with valuable insight into the language we're using, to the language that you can use, taken from these podcasts as well. So take it also as a pedagogical input.
And that's the idea, right? Well, the intention of this podcast is to help Brazilian people, Brazilian students who would like to follow a podcast, and they sometimes try to follow a podcast from the United States or England or Australia, and they have difficulties. And most times it's because of a lack of confidence.
Exactly.
They think they cannot follow. And we want people to be very comfortable with our podcast, and they will be listening to us, watching us, and they will get more and more confident so that later they will be able also to follow other podcasts from all over the world, right?
And especially seeing Brazilians speak English and with different accents, with different word choices, but just as fluent, and not just us as the hosts, but also guests from our state and others who can also speak English, not necessarily fluently, but in a way that you'll be able to see a Brazilian most of the times speaking English, and you say, hey, that's interesting. That's not a native speaker. That's a Brazilian speaker, and he can speak fluently. Maybe that will help you boost your confidence, so it will raise your awareness of how much you can also speak English.
And since you mentioned accent, something very interesting between both of us, because I have my American English background and you have your British English background. So it will be
Precisely.
nice that we'll be showing here that we can communicate, we understand each other, and accent is just one aspect of pronunciation, of speaking. Many people worry too much about accent. They want to
do.
have that perfect, the American, the British accent. And here we'll be showing that two people with different accents can communicate. They can have a conversation. They understand each other. And sometimes we're not perfect because we're not native speakers, but we try to speak
Exactly.
correctly regardless of the accent, which is the most important detail here in the communication, right?
True that. And also, like, just as you said, we're going to make mistakes as well, and that's no problem. When we speak in Portuguese, we make
Exactly.
mistakes as well. There are communication breakdowns, there are misunderstandings, and then we just ask for clarification, we recast what we're saying. So yeah, it's just natural to make mistakes when you speak.
Perfection is very hard to achieve, right? Well, I don't like to say that perfection is impossible, because if you say it's impossible, you don't even try. I like to try.
Gotta strive for perfection.
Yes, let's
Yeah.
try. Let's get as close as possible to perfection. But yes, but it's part of the process. It's part of the journey to make mistakes, to pronounce something incorrectly. And I have examples of this in Portuguese. I misspelled some words, and later people corrected me, and it was fine. It happens. So this is the intention of the podcast, to show people that it's okay to make mistakes and that you learn from your mistakes, and it's part of the whole process. So don't be afraid of making mistakes.
Yeah, you mentioned accents. It's funny how many learners of English as a second language, they'll ask how different British or American or Australian or Canadian English, how different they are. And often under the misconception that they are as different as Portuguese from Portugal and European Portuguese and the Brazilian Portuguese, whereas the differences between the different Englishes we see out there are much more in line with the differences between the Portuguese from Paraíba and the Portuguese from São Paulo.
Exactly.
So it's much closer. So we're privileged not to have that many differences.
Especially in grammar aspects, it's the same language. Sometimes we spell words a little differently, but the structure of the language is the same.
Mostly very
and we
similar.
don't see that in Portuguese from Brazil and Portugal. They speak differently.
Yeah.
Not to mention the accent, but accent, again, is a product of the environment. We're talking about different continents. So it's impossible to have exactly the same. We're here in Paraíba, and people from Pernambuco, they speak differently. And we can easily notice when someone is not from here and it's from there. The same as São Paulo, Minas Gerais, Rio Grande do Sul.
Yeah. And don't be ashamed of your English accent if you're starting to learn English. Whether you're a basic learner or a much more advanced learner, don't change your accent. Speak with your Brazilian accent. Be proud of your Brazilian accent. As long as people understand you, you should be fine. You mentioned like misspelling and mispronouncing words in Portuguese just yesterday. I think it was the first time I ever pronounced the word, I said it out loud, the word retrógrado, which in Portuguese, it's quite difficult if you think about it, retrógrado. So these are two R's in a row. So, hey, if you speak Portuguese already, that's good enough for you because it's much harder than English, I say.
Definitely, you know. Yeah. But yes, the idea here is we're going to talk about some of these linguistic aspects and some tips also. But I think that when you're learning English, I don't like to say that English is a final objective. Actually, I like when people study English because they want to achieve another objective. They want to use English to reach something. So for example, I want to travel around the world, so I want to study English.
It's like English as a means
exactly
to doing something, whereas many people see English as an end, right? So which is, it's not as motivating if you study English. And what are you going to do with it? Oh, I want to learn English. For what? Right?
Yeah. And that's exactly the idea of this podcast. The idea is not to teach English, it's to use English to talk about many topics, many different contexts using English. And that's the idea. We're going to learn other things rather than just English. We're going to use English, as you said, as the mean of this communication, but to learn many other things, right?
Yeah.
And kicking off officially this project now, since you have your British accent,
let's make use of it.
Yes, let's do it. We're here, and we had this recent event that shocked the world. I don't say it was a big surprise because people have been expecting that or had been expecting that for a while, but it happened, and the Queen has passed. It was very, very sad for many people, not only the British, right? We saw how it had these repercussions here in Brazil, in other countries. Even the president of Russia, he was one of the first people to send the condolences to the UK, to the crown. And I would like to enter into this topic. I would like to talk about this. And what is your general perspective before we go to some specific details? What was your general perspective on this happening?
So I guess English and the Crown. So that would be the title.
That's the pilot episode is English and the Crown.
English and the Crown. I think that we until yesterday we didn't know a world without Queen Elizabeth, right? So
that's true.
Our perception of the world included the existence of these very powerful figure who had always been there, right? So how many things did she see rise and fall? Like she was there when the United Kingdom joined the European Union, and she was there when the United Kingdom left the European Union. So when you think about that, it's really impressive. My perception of the Queen, my perspectives about her, I think as a person, I was always very fond of her. Like she would strike me as a very very kind person. We know that there are certainly publicity aspects to it and propaganda aspects to it, and that's understandable. Who doesn't have, right? What country does not have these sort of person to encompass so many ideas? But I think that what she did to the rest of the world, like how she was seen by the rest of the world, was as these grandmother figure. So maybe when everyone thought of a grandmother, like the stereotypical granny, they would think of Queen Elizabeth, like with the very nice hat and the very neat clothes and just a tiny dog on the side. So I don't know. That was my perception of her. I don't know much about her personality, though. What do you?
Oh, I think that
say?
recently we had we had more materials about that because they used to have a very private life, right? They didn't even go out in public. They were
True.
only restricted to the crown duties. But now we have a Netflix series about the crown that they tell a little bit of the story.
Did you
And
watch it?
I have watched it, and
Okay.
I liked it. And actually, after watching The Crown, I became more interested in researching about the stories because when I watch
True.
series, and it's these series which are based on real events, I like to go deeper, and I did, So some with other characters as well, with her husband Philip, with the Prime Minister Winston Churchill as well, some secretaries he had, and some polemic that he was involved in.
I've heard that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't watched the documentary. My mom has watched, and she said you should watch it. You like it. But I've heard that the royal family was not very pleased with some depictions that were seen in the show. Is that?
It is true. It is true because just like any other documentary they make, they have the agreement because otherwise they would have to face a lawsuit and etc.
True.
But they don't share all the details, so you don't know exactly what will be shown. And then when you start watching, you say, "Hey, that's not exactly how it happened."
Got it.
And I would not like that. So of course there are disagreements, just like we've seen recently with Neymar, our soccer player who
Yeah.
had the Netflix documentary. He also after he was actually released and there he said, I didn't like this, but he didn't know all the script, right? So I'm sure the royal family did not approve 100%. It's very difficult,
It is.
and it's very difficult to be
100%
loyal,
faithful,
like
right?
so faithful to the history, and many people are not there. They were talking about in some other seasons. I don't want to give any spoilers, but they enter in some
So spoilers.
marital.
I mean, how is it a spoiler?
Yeah, that's true, right?
Yeah,
Like we
yeah.
know what happened, but
Like
yeah, that's the thing.
like Jesus dies in the end.
No, but that's the thing. Like many people did not know about some marital problems that they
Okay.
faced. For example, involving Diana and Charles, the
True.
divorce, and the fact that Philip and Elizabeth also had their issues, and they almost got divorced.
True.
But the crown was stronger, so they could not get divorced because they had a greater issue.
Okay.
So maybe love was not there anymore, or at least they couldn't find love anymore. But they had to stay together for a greater purpose.
Okay.
And then years later, or even before that, Elizabeth's uncle abdicated the crown because of the love of his life. So
True
Elizabeth's father became king because his brother, who was supposed to be the king, said, I don't want to be the king if I cannot marry the woman I love.
Man, you're invested.
I did.
Yeah. You really.
I went deep.
Yeah, you went deep.
So he actually left the country. He went to live in Paris.
Okay.
And she was American. She was divorced.
Okay.
And they couldn't marry. So later, there comes Charles, who loved Camilla. He's now the consort queen, right? And she was divorced, and he couldn't marry her.
It seemed like they had prior history.
They have had a history from the very beginning.
Oh, okay.
But he could not marry her because she was already a mother of 2 kids.
Oh.
If I'm not mistaken, she's older than him. I think she's a bit older than him.
I see.
And they could not marry.
I see.
And then, actually, Charles was in this pursuit of the perfect woman because he was a future king, and he could not just marry anyone. And then when he met Diana, he was not there looking for Diana. Actually,
Okay, he was looking for someone to like.
her sister.
Oh,
Yeah,
what
he
a plot
was
twist!
there. He was going out with her sister, and then there's some many conspiracies
I
that she
see.
knew that he was going to be there, so she accidentally walked into the room before her sister was there,
Wow.
and then he saw her, and then he was like, "Okay, I don't want the sister now. I want her. You know, she's
That's-
much more interesting. She's fun."
It's Game of Thrones material.
It is.
That's actual Game of Thrones
Well,
material.
that's why they made the crown because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
sells. You know,
It
it's not
does.
a boring life. Many people think that the royal family has a boring life, but there's so many things inside.
Whoever said that? That's
I mean,
not-
I've heard a lot.
Yeah,
Like, oh, they have this perfect life. They don't have to
Yeah.
do the dishes.
I actually there is these there's this streamer I follow. He's a Scottish streamer, so take it with a grain of salt.
Of course, he's biased.
He's biased. He doesn't like the royalty very much. And he said, his name's Limmy. He says, watching a documentary about the Queen, am I right in saying that her years of service was basically appearing at things? I don't even mean that as a put down, but is that it mainly? The more I watch, the more I see this person who doesn't really exist. Who was she? What was she? What do you take it from what to take from this
Oh,
commentary?
that's a very harsh comment. But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
one of her main, because many people have difficulties to understand the role of the monarchy because we live in a republic. So many people think, okay, so what is the queen? I mean, what does she represent for them? Is she the president? Is she the final word? Does she give all the orders? And that's not like that. Right? They
Mhm.
have a parliament, they have the prime minister, there
Yeah.
are many things involved. So, yeah, she had to do many appearances. And of
it's
course,
true.
that the Scottish people they do not really approve this, but
Yeah.
she had more than that. You know,
Oh,
she,
no, definitely.
she had many. For example, her sister was very difficult to manage, but everything was about reputation. The crown had a reputation, has a reputation they have to keep, and now we have all these issue. Okay, she's gone. What about now? We have a new king.
Yeah.
Do they still have the same power, the same image?
Yeah, he's got a lot. He's got a lot of legwork, right, to do. He's got a lot to do. There's this common phrase we hear from and about the royals, which is that they don't have actual power. That what the power they have is purely symbolic, and that's not entirely true, because through their words, through their actions, there are many issues of diplomacy that they can interfere. And you mentioned the parliament, and for those who don't know, the parliament is equivalent to our Congress. So it's basically very similar. There is an upper house and there is a lower house. So in the upper house, the House of Lords, it's equivalent to our Senate with senators. And in the lower house, you've got the members of parliament in general, the representatives in a way, who are equivalent to our deputados in our Congreso, in our Congress. And not many people know, but supposedly, theoretically, the king or the queen, they have the power to dissolve the parliament.
They do.
Which is a lot of power.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that they need to be in accordance with each other. So, of course, there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of interaction. I think that the leaders of the parliament, they represent the people, right? Because they're elected. It's not like you're born this way. So they represent what people really want. So the queen, the king, whoever is in charge, needs to be sensible to administrate this situation. Okay, maybe I disagree with the prime minister, but he represents the people. As long as it doesn't hurt the crown or harm our reputation, we need to listen to them.
There is if we draw a parallel to Brazil, can you imagine if, say, we didn't have presidents, but can you imagine if our prime minister, if we didn't have presidents, simply decided that they would dissolve the parliament, the Congress?
Yeah,
that's
too much power.
It would be civil war on the streets.
I don't like having this type of power because I think that you have the risk of falling into a dictatorship somehow, right?
And Do you know what happened to the last king who tried to do that?
Mhm.
He was Charles the First. So it's a little bit worrying that Charles is now the third, but let's hope nothing happens to him. But the first Charles, I think it was in the 1600s, late 1600s.
Mhm.
He tried to dissolve the parliament. He was beheaded.
Really?
The parliament voted for his beheading. So I don't think any other king or queen is going to try that.
They're not going to try, right?
Soon.
They have precedent, and it's not good.
Yeah,
right?
the
And so-
precedent is not
but
good.
talking about that, like we have a new king,
Mhm.
and do you see any impacts, economically speaking, around the world? Do you think that these change of any, because we're having Brazilian elections, and we know that these elections can have some economic results depending on whoever wins.
Mm.
Do you think that with a new king now in England, this can somehow influence economy in a global scenario?
I think so because from the Queen, we didn't know much. Her appearances were very controlled in controlled environments, and she had speeches written for her, and we wouldn't know her private thoughts. But Charles, as prince, throughout his life, he's had more freedom to express himself, though we know, albeit quite limited, but more than the Queen.
Yeah.
So I think that his words up until now can be used in a sort of way to predict his actions or non-actions. Um, um, so maybe there's that. So through what he has already produced throughout his life, in his public appearances or in his speeches or in his interviews, we may be able to predict where he's going. But then again, he's quite old, isn't he?
We don't know how long he'll be there, right? For
Yeah,
because
yeah.
he's very sick also.
Yeah.
But you talked about the diplomatic duty of the person in the crown, the king or the queen. Now the king. We know that England they have some colonies, and some of them in Africa, in other countries, they have tried to start a movement and get out from this dependency. But the queen, with her diplomatic way, she could always find a solution to just make people let it go, and they never went forward with this idea. Do you think now that she's gone and they have a new king who is not publicly approved, like entirely approved, do you think that there is a risk that some of these countries can start a movement um, to get out of these colonies?
You mean like maybe um, his becoming king might embolden other countries, like
Sure,
like
yeah.
take advantage of the Queen's.
Yes, like
Death.
I depend on England, but now I want my independence, and now it's the great moment because
Oh,
it's a
sure.
transition.
Oh, sure. And
So I would try to get out.
yeah, I think it's the perfect moment if you are separatist. Like that's the perfect moment because they're weak, in a way. Oh my God, am I sounding like a
They're
Game of
mourning,
Thrones, like
right?
a
They're
Game of
actually
Thrones
mourning, but yeah,
writer at this time? Yeah. So there's this conspiracy theory, which kind of feeds into that narrative, which is that when the Queen felt that she was maybe about to die or she was too sick, the plan was to take her to Scotland. Although we know that this time of the year she would normally be in Scotland, but because Scotland has such a history with England and the UK, they've just had a referendum 2017, I guess, to possibly leave the United Kingdom, and maybe taking her there was a means to soften a bit um, the verve, the drive for separation. Now, what does that mean to the former colonies and the Commonwealth nations? Up until yesterday, sorry, up until the 10th of September, if you opened any Wikipedia page, Canada, New Zealand, Jamaica, Australia, I think Barbados, and you go, the Wikipedia page often has like the form of government on the right panel.
Yeah.
And you would see there Queen Elizabeth. And just minutes after her death, all of them had already been updated to Charles. So
they actually accepted this transition, at least apparently.
yeah,
it was fine.
I think for the Commonwealth nations, yeah, definitely, especially those that are very in line with the British, just with the British monarchy and the British government. But I think, yeah, indeed, those global South nations, especially African nations, who'd been colonized, I think that's a great moment for them to try to distance themselves from the monarchy.
But you mentioned something very, very relevant now. You said that she chose, she was going to Scotland. She loved going to Scotland. I think we even
did.
have a picture of,
Oh yeah, it's true.
and she liked me. I think this is Scotland, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. This is the Balmoral Castle, and that's a family. We've got Prince Charles over there. I think that's Prince Andrew, who's got some serious allegations against him. Don't really recall. And there's Philip over there. Maybe you've watched The Crown. You might know who.
But she's not really relevant to the crown, right?
Okay, got it. So
she was not very polemic. He is now, right? So they might even talk
we'll
about
get
him.
there. We'll get there. So Balmoral Castle, that's where she spent her last days. And it's interesting though that her last public picture was there with the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss.
Yeah.
So she even lived as far as to see the last Prime Minister that has come to power.
And there is, you mentioned about this conspiracy theory, that she was already planning to be in Scotland when her day came. So do you think it makes sense? Do you think it was a smart move to calm feelings down, like when she passed?
Let's say it was like that. Let's say that, yeah, she knew that was the plan all along. She wanted to go to Scotland and she would spend her last days there. I think it does help a bit because the first pictures and the first crowds, the first days of the funeral and the mourning, they all happen there, right?
Exactly.
So St. Charles Cathedral, beautiful place. I mean, it's just beautiful. And if you are an English learner and you're planning to, like, let's say you're going to take an exchange program, most people like to go to Dublin or to London, especially because they're so
Brighton now.
Brighton, yeah. And these are great places, but they're also too expensive. And you have lots of Brazilians there. Now, don't tell anyone I told you that. Because Scotland is a great place for you to learn English because there aren't as many Brazilians and it's a bit cheaper, and take it with a grain of salt. It's much more beautiful.
What about the accent? Many people talk about the Scottish accent, the Irish accent. They say that it's very, very different from the British accent. What did you feel?
Well, we've seen it in the first days of her her funeral. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. I'm not sure if it's a funeral, the 10-day mourning. I don't know how they call it.
I don't know.
I might check.
Yeah,
I might check in a few moments. What's it that they call it? And there were several rituals that we saw on TV of priests and journalists who were from Scotland. And because she died there, they were reporting from Scotland on site. And we could see, maybe for the first time in many months, Scottish people speaking. And it's true that they tone it down a little bit. They do try to standardize a few things when they're speaking to people who are not Scottish. So yes, it's kind of easy to understand if you are there to study. If you were there as a tourist, most people will adapt to make themselves be understood. I checked.
It's an amazing place to go, right? Like the nature. What about the weather there? Is it too cold?
It's
just like England.
just the same, just the same as England. Maybe a little more windy, and you get sunnier days in summer than England.
But then you think, because Scotland is great, it's a great place to be. Maybe it couldn't have been a move, but she really enjoyed being there, right? So it could have been like a natural choice. Okay, I know that my days are coming. So I want to spend the last days of my life in the place that I like the most. And Scotland is the place I like the most, so I'm gonna go there.
Who wouldn't? I mean, who wouldn't spend their last days in the place they like
That's
the
true,
most, right?
yeah.
If
you can do it,
if
right?
you can do it, yeah, yeah, especially. We know that many many English people had summer houses in Scotland. So Paul McCartney, most famously, he had a farm in Scotland, and he would be there um, as often as he could. And he's not the only one. There are many areas in Scotland, especially in the Highlands, which are owned by Saudi royals. So Saudi royals and princes who want to maybe role play a British life, they buy lands in Scotland. And I don't remember the figures right now. I will check in a minute, but it seems like a lot of the private lands in the Highlands in Scotland are owned by Saudis. So yeah, I guess it's a place for royals. When you become king, maybe you will
I don't think
buy
that
your
they
own
will come,
castle.
yeah.
So we were talking about the Queen in Edinburgh and actually in Scotland, and we can see that the kids are wearing kilts with the plaid patterns.
They love play, don't they?
Yes, with the patterns of the royal family. Actually, they have a specific pattern to them, and we were talking about that thing of whether it's going to embolden Scotland maybe to seek separation from independence from the United Kingdom. And I think it will. We've got the referendum from 2016, 2017, if I recall correctly, and they lost. That it was 51% who voted to remain and 49% who
That's
voted
pretty
to
close.
leave. It's pretty close. It's pretty close. And at the time, the United Kingdom campaigned for Scotland to remain under the reasoning and using that as argument that Scotland, if you leave the United Kingdom, you are also leaving the European Union. That was bad for Scotland because, much like any other country part of the European Union, there are certainly benefits to being in that in that relation.
Benefits, you mean economically speaking?
Yeah.
Cultural also.
Sure,
Many different areas.
Especially for a country as open and progressive as Scotland, because they really like these multicultural cosmopolitan cities. Edinburgh is a lot like that. And just 2 years after they voted to remain, understanding that if they left, they would also be leaving the European Union, the United Kingdom brings up Brexit. So it was like stabbing Scotland on the back.
And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's actually a fact.
Not at all, yeah.
We know that conspiracies, they have been part of the royal family. For example, we talked about Charles and Diana. And the Crown actually shows that how the divorce came. And there is a conspiracy theory that Philip was who actually orchestrated the death of Diana. Did you know that?
What the hell? Yeah, really?
Because he was not very fond of the divorce, because he could not divorce when it was his time. And then he was like, okay, so I could not divorce and then he can? That's not fair. If I couldn't, he cannot.
Oh my God.
And then they got divorced, and then he became furious. He did not talk to his son for a while. And then she died.
So people make an association between these things.
And now there is a recent conspiracy theory. Which is, I don't know if you can call a theory or if it's like an expectation from the public, that Charles would resign before becoming king. He would just say, he would just abdicate from the crown because of his age, because of his health conditions. What do you think about that? I think there has always been an expectation that he would not become king, but hey, I think that bird has flown because he has become king. So maybe he will surrender his crown to his son. I think there is an expectation, especially because he's quite old. He will have a much shorter reign, and then the UK will have to go through a lot of changes.
soon after his death as well. And not just cultural or anything like that, but we've got many things which will change with Elizabeth's death. And there's going to be, think about currency. Like,
Yeah.
it's expensive to print new currency.
That's true, because they have to change the face on the bill.
Notes, yeah.
Right?
There we go. There's
Ah,
it.
yeah, note bill.
Note bill.
Yeah,
note
American
bill.
British. That's it.
That's it. There's the coin. So if you, all the coins in the UK, all the British pound currency shows the Queen, and it's funny because if you ever go to England, it's actually interesting to see different faces, different ages of the Queen throughout the same coin. So if you're lucky enough, you might find two different £1 coins with different faces, because she's been there for so long that you end up finding her aging
They
in
had
the
to
currency.
update the things, right?
Exactly. And so say Charles leaves the crown and gives it to his son in 5 years. So that's another round of printing money, currency, stamps.
Are they already, because like you mentioned that Wikipedia has already changed from Elizabeth to Charles.
Uh-huh.
Are they already printing new notes or bills or coins with the new king's face?
I'm not sure if they're already doing, but they have announced that they will roll out new currency. Mainly, I think the notes are going to change much faster, and the coins will probably last for quite long.
And from the public's opinion, do you think that if the people could vote on who the new king would be, they would vote for Charles or they would vote for William already?
Well, I think if you could vote for the king, then he would not be that much of a king, you know, like
that's true. No, but hypothetically
speaking, if they could choose, I don't know, give people the power to choose whether they want a king or not. They might not vote for any as a protest.
But if they only have sometimes you only have two options. Right?
I got it. You want a dilemma. So okay, a Mexican standoff. You have to choose one of them. I think they would choose the prince.
The prince.
Yeah, maybe because
the new prince.
Maybe because of Kate.
Yeah, that's a point, because Camilla was always, I mean, Camilla is the queen now because the Queen Elizabeth asked her to be chair. There's a document, right, that she said, that she stated that she would like her to become the queen, because after the divorce,
queen consort,
exactly. And Camilla was one of the reasons of the divorce between Charles and Diana, because he always loved her. He married Diana. He had 2 kids with Diana, but he loved Camilla. But he could not. He was with Camilla.
That's a bold claim.
I know, but it's a fact.
Yeah.
It is a
God,
fact.
I'd have to watch The Crown.
not only The Crown. There is a documentary on Netflix called Diana in Her Own Words, where she tells her version of the story.
Ooh.
And it's interesting because you can see from a different perspective. You know, not only like journalists and enthusiasts of The Crown reporting what they saw, but from someone who was actually inside. You know. And like many people did not like Camilla because she was, of course, that Diana was not only like a bed of roses. She had her problems and her issues.
Sure, yeah.
She was also involved with different men, because there was a point that she saw, wait, my marriage is going nowhere, so I need to love. A woman needs to love. A man needs to love. So she was also looking for new partners, and these became very polemic. And long story short, they got divorced.
Yeah.
But people never saw Camilla with good eyes, you know. And now, maybe because of Kate, as seen as a new Diana, she's the perfect lady. She's private. She's dedicated to her family. She is what people expect of a queen. In this stereotype of a queen.
She's probably what the Queen Elizabeth always wanted.
Probably.
Yeah,
because that's like that's just speculation, right? It's not stated, and there is no report on that from anybody. There is a biography written by a journalist who followed Elizabeth. It's a long book, but it's very interesting because she had permission of Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, Her Majesty, to actually write this biography. I don't know if it's entirely true. I think it's not, because it's very difficult to have, all
They'll
these.
always take liberties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, but Camilla definitely was not the one to be in this position of a queen. Kate, yes, not Meghan. It's another point,
Mm.
But because of Camilla, Charles has his image a little stained.
Yeah,
And
definitely,
in my opinion,
definitely tarnished. I think the British population as a whole does not really like her.
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know much about her. But then Kate is quite loved throughout.
She has always been, right, from the very beginning.
Okay, yeah. So,
and also William, because he has been. Although there was a little polemic these days at the funeral, they were walking, and Meghan and Harry were there, and they were holding hands, and Kate and William were walking right next to them, and they were not holding hands.
oh Jesus!
So people were talking about, look at the distance between them.
Oh my God, they're analyzing the
Meghan,
centimeters.
yeah.
Oh, no.
I mean, I think it's not something to
Yeah, it's not.
determine whether they love each other or not. They have always been very close. William has never been involved in polemics, and we are living in 2022. So if he makes a mistake, everybody will know.
Yeah, we've always been fascinated by royals, haven't we? Like, it's even if you dislike it, you're just fascinated by it because it's like untouchable, it's unachievable, and I think that's what
It's
fascinates
like they're
us.
superior to all of us somehow.
No,
right?
they are.
They are.
It's not like they are. They are.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, maybe I'd like to have that much money.
Well, after I watch The Crown, I don't know if I would like to be there.
Okay.
Maybe you should watch. Then you might change your mind, because it is a life of dedication. You have all the money you can imagine, but you cannot just enjoy it. You have a lot of responsibilities, especially regarding your image. That if you want to drink a beer in a pub, like everybody does,
but that certainly hasn't held them back from doing some things, right? And then maybe in the next episode we can talk a little bit about Prince Andrew, and he's very tarnished.
Polemics involving the royal family. There are many. I mean, we need to study and summarize, because there are sure a lot to talk.
Quite a lot. It's a long list.
Actually, Elizabeth's sister, she was in love with her bodyguard. Right, and she wanted to.
Yes, it's a love story, like Romeo and Juliet.
Exactly, and the queen had a perfect solution for that. Just send him away. Right, again, go live somewhere else.
Is that a metaphor? Send him away?
No, away. No. I mean, out of the.
Really away.
Like, go on a mission. Okay. You are a bodyguard, so you work for the army. Okay, so go to Australia, go to Barbados.
I thought it was like go to
on a short mission, just 3 years.
Afghan war.
No. Something like like we care because you love him. So we care about him, and we care so much that we're going to give him like a
promotion.
Nice
He's going to get a promotion, yeah.
And it's only a short time. He's going to be there for 3 years. He'd probably he'll find another girl, and then he'll come back,
What a shame, right? They were destined to be together.
Well, it is a solution that she always liked. Okay, Philip, you're not happy here? Go on a mission to Australia. Go open the rugby games there, and then you come back.
And you speak of the royal family as if it was hard work.
It is hard work.
I'd like to go on a mission in Australia, maybe in Edinburgh, in Balmoral Castle. That would be lovely.
Well, yeah. I mean, the first days might be fun. Actually, they are fun, right? Like you have all the money you can imagine. You can have any car you dream of, and but then when you see that you cannot even, I don't know if I would like to be a king. Maybe a prince would be nice, or maybe the cousin.
Don't.
No, I mean...
Yeah, because if you're a cousin in a royal family, you will marry your cousin. That's what happened there, right?
That's true, yeah.
That's true, yeah. No, I mean, nothing against it.
But like Harry...
Maybe some things against it.
Yeah, but like Harry, because he was not the one to be the king, he had a lighter life. But he got lost in some... Especially after his mom died. So he was involved in some polemic drugs and fights and everything. But... it was Harry, and Harry could do it. William could not.
Yeah, absolutely.
He could not have his moment of fury. He could not have his moment of, okay, I want to be a rebel now because my mom has just died, and or maybe she was killed, and I cannot show the world how angry I am. I have to be political. I have to say, okay, it was an accident. It happens. It can happen to anyone. It's unfortunately happened to my mom.
But there's also this thing that they need to maintain their status, and for William, yeah, William Kate, yeah,
Yep.
from William to be like the image of the crown, of the image of the royal family, is also a means for him to maintain his income. So I guess his job is to keep still so that his bank account keeps full. I mean, that's a trade-off. I understand, but
it is a work,
yeah,
and it might be hard work.
and it might be hard work. And I'll get back to that tweet that I mentioned earlier, because I think Lemay kind of summarizes it when he says, "I'm not a royalist, but credit where credit's due. Have you ever agreed to go to do something that you wish you hadn't? That was the Queen's life, day in, day out.
That is true.
No wonder she always looked miserable."
Wow. Yeah,
She did a bit.
she did.
Yeah,
Like, but actually,
yeah.
she seemed like she's a puppet, because like there was before. I don't remember her name before becoming Elizabeth. Do you remember her name before?
No, her name is Elizabeth, isn't it?
It is.
Queen Anne Mary Elizabeth, isn't
But
it?
she had a nickname that her father used to call her, Lilibet, something like that. And like
Okay.
she was Lilibet, and then she became Queen Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Alexandra Mary. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary.
But then she was not that. She was Lilibet,
I got it.
and then she became Queen Elizabeth.
Oh yeah, it's a character. Yeah.
So
it's a character.
you actually sometimes you think A, but the crown thinks B, and you have
Yes.
to act B.
And it's a business. The Buckingham Palace
business.
is a business.
Yeah.
It's a very
And you have to deal with a lot of people in many different situations, and it's very difficult. So yes, she looked maybe not miserable, but tired,
Yeah.
exhausted.
Who wouldn't be? Yeah.
Yeah. Even though she had all the people to help her, she wouldn't even dress up by herself. There was always someone there,
Oh sure.
you know.
Is it right to say, is the Queen to the monarchy what Zagotinha is to the vaccine in Brazil?
I think that's a good question for our audience. Please, if you're watching this, let us know what you think. Because
Is the Queen the Zagotinha of the monarchy? I think that's a good one, isn't it?
maybe, yeah. Let's see what they think.
Yeah.
Right, let's see what they think.
Is that a wrap?
It is a wrap.
It is a wrap? Okay.
Rodolfo, it's been a pleasure. It was amazing talking to you. Time just flew
Lovely.
by,
It
and this is
did,
just the
didn't
first
it?
one, right? Just
Yes.
the first one. We'll be
Yeah.
here weekly with
And-
guests,
Sure.
sharing a lot of ideas and great talk.
And let's save more for later. Maybe talk a little bit about Prince Andrew. I'd like that in a
Yes,
volume
yeah.
2 edition of,
Yeah, we can.
of
we can
English
win.
and the Crown.
Yes,
Yeah.
I like that. And yes, so it's this is us, English, and this is our podcast, Papo Inglês, made in Brazil. We'll be talking here about many different topics with different people, interesting people, relevant people who have a lot to add. I'll be here with my partner Rodolfo, always together. Thank you very
And
much.
I'll be here with Thaliso. Thank you so much.
For God's sake, yeah, here with me, helping me on this journey. I hope you enjoyed the first one, and I'll see you next time. Rodolfo, thank you.
Thank you. God save the king.
Or the queen.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. Or the king's son. I don't know. We'll see what happens. See you next time. Bye-bye.
See ya.